بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome once again to another episode of our series on the Quran in the month of Ramadan. We're going to continue. The author, he says, alayhi rahmatullah, Imam al-Nawawi in his book At-Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Quran, the clarification on the etiquettes of the one who carries the Quran. The author, he says, and he speaks in this section about the importance of the teacher, being good and kind towards the person learning the Quran. So then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي لَهُ أَنْ يَرْفُقَ بِمَنْ يَقْرَأُ عَلَيْهِ. The author, he says, it's incumbent for the teacher to always have a level of kindness towards the person who is reading Quran on him or her. As a teacher of Quran should always make sure that they are kind to the one who is going to read the Quran on them, or meaning their student. وَيُرَحِّبَ بِهِ. يُرَحِّبَ بِهِ means that they should encourage and welcome them to the idea of wanting to learn the Quran. So the Quran should be something that a person should be encouraged towards learning. Okay, so a person shouldn't be made to fear or shouldn't be made to feel afraid to learn the Quran. It shouldn't even be made seemingly that it might be difficult or they won't be able to do it. A person should be, under all circumstances, encouraged to learn the Quran. The author, he says, وَيُحْسِنَ إِلَيْهِ, should be extra kind to the person who wants to learn the Quran. بِحَسَبِ حَالِهِمَا, according to the circumstances and their respective conditions. Depending on their situation and their conditions, the teacher should know what level and what's appropriate for their student in making sure that they welcome them and they make them feel at ease when it comes to learning the Quran. Then Imam al-Nawawi said, فَقَدْ رَوَيْنَا عَنْ أَبِي هَارُونَ الْعَبْدِيِّ قال, he said that it was narrated and transmitted by Abi Harun al-Abdi. He said, so he was one of the students of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, and he narrates this from Abi Sa'id al-Khudri. He said, قَالَ كُنَّا نَأْتِي أَبَا سَعِيدٍ الْخُدْرِي رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. He said, we would come to Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, فيقول, and whenever we would come, he would say to us, مرحبا بوصية رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He would always say, welcome by the, personally, by the personal invitation, okay, an injunction of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because inna Nabiya sallallahu alayhi wasallam قال, because the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, inna الناس لكم تبع, indeed people will come to you as followers, successors. وإن رجالا يأتونكم من أقطار الأرض يتفقهون في الدين, and people will come all over the world to come and seek knowledge from you and to understand their religion. فإذا أتوكم, if they come to you, فاستوصوا بهم خيرا, always give them glad tidings and good news, okay, and tell them good things. رواه الترمذي, and this was narrated, collected by Imam Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah وغيرهما, and the hadith is a sound hadith. So this hadith was mentioned also by Abu Na'im in his book Hilyatul Awliya, and Khatib al-Baghdadi also mentioned this hadith. So it's a hadith which is basically, in other words, welcoming anybody who wants to learn anything about the religion. So anybody who has the intention to learn, anybody who has the intention to study and to understand the religion in detail, then they are supposed to be given the good news and glad tidings. So it's a welcome, it's a personal invitation from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Imam al-Nawawi, he said, وَرَوَيْنَا وَنَحْوَهُ في مسند الدارمي عن أبي الدرداء رضي الله عنه, because this was also mentioned in the Musnad of Imam al-Darimi on the authority of Abu Darda radiallahu anhu. So Abu Darda radiallahu anhu also mentioned, narrated this hadith in the Musnad of Imam Ad-Darimi. And now then he continues into a next section of the book, speaking about the fact that it's important that the teacher not only is somebody who teaches the Quran, but they also have a personal relationship with the student, in the sense that they give them good advice and always do that which is in their interests. So this chapter is headed في نصح المعلم لطالب القرآن وإكرامه. The advice and the sincere advice that a teacher should give their student, and also honor. So by honoring and giving them good advice, this is the characteristics of a true teacher of Quran. He mentions and he says, Imam al-Nawawi, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَبْذُلَ لَهُمُ النَّصِيحَةَ, and it's incumbent and obligatory that the teacher expends and gives the student that he has or she has, sincere advice. فإن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, because the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, الدين النصيحة, the religion in its entirety is an-nasiha. An-nasiha could mean sincere advice. It could has many different translations. It could mean an embodiment of sincerity. And for whom? Lillahi, for Allah, وَلِكِتَابِهِ, for the revelation, وَلِرَسُولِهِ, for the messenger, وَلِإِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, for those who are in authority of the Muslims, وَعَامَتِهِمْ, and also for their lay people. And this hadith was collected by Imam Muslim in his authentic hadith. Imam Nawawi, he explains a section of the hadith. What does it mean to be sincere and an embodiment of sincere towards the Quran, or nasiha, or advice? What is sincerity in relation to Allah and His book? So he says, وَمِنَ النَّصِيحَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَلِكِتَابِهِ, from being sincere to Allah and the revelation, is إِكْرَامُ قَارِئِهِ وَطَالِبِهِ. From being sincere towards the Quran is by honoring the one who wants to recite Quran and the one who is seeking knowledge of the Quran. وَإِرْشَادُهُ إِلَى مَصْلَحَتِهِ, and to guide them to that which is good for them, meaning to always be conscious of that which is in their best interests. وَالرِّفْقُ بِهِ, and to be kind towards them. وَمُسَاعَدَتُهُ عَلَى طَلَبِهِ بِمَا أَمْكَنَ, and to assist them on their journey in learning and knowledge as much as they're able to do so. وَتَأَلُّفُ قَلْبِ الطَّالِبِ, and to soften the heart, soften the heart of the one who's learning the Quran, encouraging them and making them feel really welcome, and giving them the belief that they can do it, giving them level of honoring, honor and prestige. وَأَن يَكُونَ سَمْحًا بِتَعْلِيمِهِ فِي رِفْقٍ, so there should be a level of kindness that's ingrained within the education in which they're teaching. مُتَلَطِّفًا بِهِ, being soft, وَمُحَرِّضًا لَهُ عَلَى التَّعَلُّمِ, and encouraging for them to learn. So to tell them that you can do it, you can learn. Who says you can't learn the Quran? You can do it. You can do anything you want to. So giving them that level of confidence to be able to feel that they can learn the Quran, instead of beating them about it. Sometimes, unfortunately, what we see nowadays is sometimes teachers, they don't really encourage the students in the way in which they should be. In fact, sometimes they make the students doubt that they can do it at all. And sometimes we need to be very, very careful of these subtle exchanges that we can have with other people, because we don't realize sometimes that what we're really doing is putting them off. So for example, by saying that that was a horrible way of reciting, for example, even these words like that was a bad recitation, what's wrong with you, or come on, that's not good, things like that. We might think of it as something, we might even think of it as something normal, it's not a big deal, but sometimes it can adversely impact the confidence of a student. So you always say, for example, look at it if you word it in another way. So for example, imagine somebody saying like, okay, that overall was a very good recitation, but I want you to improve on this and this and this. Look at the difference. The message could be put across in a different way. And it's something that we all need to kind of learn. Then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي لَهُ أَنْ يُذَكِّرَهُ فَضِيلَةَ ذَلِكَ. This teacher should always remind the student the virtue of what they're doing. So you're learning Quran, that's not something small, that's a big thing. So they should always remind them that they're on the path of the greatest people who ever walked the earth. And the author, he says, لِيَكُونَ سَبَبًا فِي نَشَاطِهِ وَزِيَادَةً فِي رَغْبَتِهِ. And this should serve, the author, he says, as a reason to encourage them and for it to be to increase their aspirations, okay, and their desire for the Quran. When you encourage somebody and you give them the confidence to be able to do something, the natural outcome is that they're going to want to do it, and they're going to be excited at the prospects of being able to achieve that which they now feel confident in being able to do so, in being able to achieve. And then Imam Nawawi, he said, وَيُزَهِّدَهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا. And let the teacher encourage the student to be somewhat detached from this worldly life, not to be too attached to this worldly life. You teach them about the realities of this worldly life. Teach them that this life is temporary. Teach it that's something that the teachers should be doing. It's not only about teaching Quran, it's also about giving them an education, a Quranic education. So a type of education in which they teach the students that this life is temporal. It's not a permanent abode, and there will be a time in which they will leave this worldly life. وَيَصْرِفَهُ عَنِ الرُّكُونِ إِلَيْهَا وَالْإِغْتِرَارِ بِهَا. And the author, he says, and he should, or the teacher should, always try and discourage the student from having too many hopes in this worldly life and to being deceived by the glitter and the glamour and the distractions that are part of the human experience in this dunya, or in this worldly life. وَيُذَكِّرَهُ أَنَّ الْإِشْتِغَالَ بِالْقُرْآنِ وَسَائِرِ الْعُلُومِ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ هُوَ طَرِيقَةُ الْحَازِمِينَ وَعِبَادِ اللَّهِ الْعَارِفِينَ. And the author, he says, the teacher should always remind the student that busying yourself with the Quran and all of the other sciences of the religion, that is the path of the servants of Allah who have knowledge of Allah, and those who are the most determined. وَأَنَّ ذَلِكَ رُتْبَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. And that was the level of the prophets, and that was the position of the prophets. So they are doing something which, learning the revelation, was something that the Prophet ﷺ himself did. That's actually a position of the prophets. وَأَنَّ ذَلِكَ رُتْبَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ وَسَلَامُهُ عَلَيْهِمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. And that's the station of the prophets. May Allah's blessings and peace be upon them all. Also then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَحْنُوَ عَلَى الطَّالِبِ. يحنو means the teacher should be very merciful, soft, kind towards their students, okay, and care for them a lot, very caring. وَيَعْتَنِيَ بِمَصَالِحِهِ. And the teacher should always be looking out for the best interests of their students, كَاعْتِنَائِهِ بِمَصَالِحِ نَفْسِهِ وَمَصَالِحِ وَلَدِهِ. In the exact same way, the author says that the teacher would look after their own best interests and the best interests of their own biological children, if they have children. So if a teacher should take care of the student and want good for them in the exact same way that they would want good for themselves and they would want good for their own children. Because that's the real position of a teacher. The position Imam al-Ghazali mentions in his book Ihya, and he mentions it in some sections in the Kitab al-Ilm, and when he speaks about the relationship between the teacher and the student, he mentions that the mu'allim, or the teacher, is on the level of the parent. So they're on is the equivalent of a parent in the relationship that they have with the student. So the relationship between a student and their teacher is like the relationship between a parent and a child. Okay, so that's something which is very important, and that's the whole reason that we have education, and that's the whole point of education. Education isn't that you should only be friends with a student, even though there's an element of that depending on the circumstance and the situation. But primarily, the teacher is a teacher, and the teacher should be looking out for the best interests of their student, just like a parent would do for their child. Thus, then he says, ويجري المتعلم مجرى ولده في الشفقة عليه. The author, he says, the student then takes the position of the child in terms of being kind towards the student, meaning the same way that a teacher would be kind to their own child, they should be kind to their student. والاهتمام بمصالحه. So a lot of sometimes there might be some repetition, but that's only because of the author is trying to drive home the point, and he's trying to emphasize on how important this is. So he's saying الاهتمام بمصالحه, meaning having a considerable amount of concern for the well-being of the child or the student. So they have a student, a teacher should always be concerned for their well-being. وَالصَّبْرِ عَلَى جَفَائِهِ وَسُوءِ أَدَبِهِ. And he says the teacher should also be patient on sometimes on sometimes the reckless behavior or bad character of the student. Sometimes that's something that the teacher should be patient with. So sometimes the student, obviously, especially if they're young, sometimes they can behave in a way which is poorly. So poor behavior and poor etiquette is something that the teacher should somewhat be patient with. And the author then he says, وَيَعْذِرَهُ فِي قِلَّةِ أَدَبِهِ فِي بَعْضِ الْأَحْيَانِ. And sometimes the teacher should excuse the student on account of poor behavior and poor etiquette and poor character. Why? He says, فَإِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ مُعَرَّضٌ لِلنَّقَائِصِ. Because human beings are subject to deficiency. We're all deficient in our own ways. So especially the he says, لَا سِيَّمَا إِذَا كَانَ صَغِيرَ سِنٍ. Especially if they're young in age. So if they're young in age, then that's even more of a common occurrence, and that's something which is quite normal, in fact. So if that's the case, then it should always be that the teacher should always be patient with the student at all times, and not at all times, in many circumstances, depending on the situation. وينبغي أن يحب له ما يحب لنفسه من الخير. The author, he says, and the teacher should always love for the student that which they would love for themselves in goodness. وأن يكره له ما يكره لنفسه من النقص مطلقا. And the teacher should dislike for their student that which they would dislike for themselves. So, meaning the teacher should be looking out for the well-being and the best interests of their student. فقد ثبت, the author says, فقد ثبت في الصحيحين, and it's a hadith, authentic, and it's been established in both of the authentic collections, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, which means none of you believe until you love for your brother that which you love for yourself. So that relationship should always be present. The relationship in which you wish for this person that which you would wish for yourself. That's something which is very, very important. So generally speaking, we kind of learn from these ahadith or this general body of advice, that the relationship between a student and a teacher from the point of the teacher is that they should always try and make sure that they take care of the well-being of the student, and the student should always be encouraged to want to learn the Quran. The student should always be given confidence that they can achieve and they can learn what they want to learn. The student should be guided in the best way possible. The teacher should always be very merciful with the student, because obviously that comes along with the encouragement. Only a person who is shown kindness would be able to progress in Quran, most likely. There have been many instances actually in which a student was put off the Quran and learning the Quran simply because of the fact that they were convinced through their interactions with their teachers that they weren't able to learn the Quran. And that's something which is very detrimental, because what it does is it kind of forces, and it kind of it kind of, when this person grows up, they do not ever have the desire to ever want to learn the Quran because of those experiences. And that shouldn't really be the case. A person should always be given a good introduction to the Quran, and a person should always be encouraged to learn the Quran. And it shouldn't have an association with, you know, telling somebody off. It shouldn't have an association always with it being boring. That's one of the problems that exists, is that Quran, learning Quran and madrasa, all of these things are often seen as something boring, and it shouldn't be the case. So a madrasa should always facilitate, you know, means of having fun for the student. So if the student recites the Quran, or if there's competitions on Quran, if they do well, they get a prize, for example. Always encouraging them to want to come to madrasa, to want to learn the Quran. That's how it's done. So that's what at-ta'alluf is. And I know we spoke about at-ta'alluf, which means that you soften their heart towards the desire, or make their hearts desirous of learning the Quran. And it's not really difficult to do. We just kind of really need to understand. I mean, that's what they do in normal schools. So in all of the in all of the state schools, and even private schools, there's always means of encouragement to kind of learn. It's always that there's always something associated with education that's made to be fun. Now, not all education is fun, because that's the nature of education. You want them to learn something, but you can kind of surround it, and you can kind of make make the environment fun, and make the environment one in which uh, would be conducive to the well-being of the child. And that's the whole point. And the Quran really is no different. Okay, and the Quran should be given that level of respect even more. Imam An-Nawawi is mentioning this when he was alive. He was saying that, there should be a standard for for teachers in Quran, or teachers of Quran. Sorry, there should be a standard that they follow in terms of behavior and in terms of relationship that they have with the student. So this is something which is really very important. So this is something that we should kind of always make sure that we take very, very seriously. He also spoke about the importance of being more than just a Quran teacher, also kind of teaching them life experiences. So kind of teaching the students what to expect from this worldly life, uh, and to always speak about the afterlife, to always speak about the paradise, speak about the hellfire, speak about the realities of the akhirah, because these are things that kind of put everything into context. Many a time students are learning Quran, and no one's ever told them why they should learn Quran. Which is quite sad. So the expectation for them to go and learn Quran, go to madrasa or whatever, to learn the Quran, and they don't know why they're doing it really. So they just know they have to do it, and that they'll probably be in trouble if they don't do it properly. But nobody's ever taken up the time to explain why they should be learning the Quran. And that's something which is quite sad. It's something that shouldn't be happening. The children should always be told why they should learn the Quran. and they should always be taught the importance of learning the Quran. And what do they get out of it? Why should they learn the Quran? What do they get out of learning the Quran? So they should be taught about salvation. They should be taught about the rewards associated with the Quran. They should be taught about what the Quran is, the nature of the Quran. These are all this is all part of the education when it comes to, or learning when it comes to, this is all to do with Quranic education. The teacher should love for the student what they love for themselves. So that's an extra. That's a more of a personal relationship with the student, in which a teacher doesn't only see it or view it as a job or a task that needs to be done, but more of a but they actually view it as it being a personal responsibility. You know, they want the student to excel. They want this person to do well. So that's something which is very important. And the parents should also be very helping at the same time, because when a student comes to, school to learn Quran, for example, then the teacher has an expectation that, or they have expectations that they did their homework, or they practiced the Quran whilst they were at home. So this is something that the parents also need to kind of help in. There's a responsibility of the actual parents, and there's also a responsibility of that from the teacher. And then he concluded, Imam Nawawi alayhi rahmatullah, with the hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, just bringing home the point that nobody truly believes unless they love for their brother what they love for themselves. And the context of the hadith in this specific section is speaking about a teacher should desire for the student that which he or she would desire for themselves or for their own children. And that's something which is important. Inshallah, this section is quite long, so we're going to be continuing, inshallah, in the next episode. Jazakumullah khair for joining us once again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi